Today, we're diving into something truly powerful. It's Saeed Khashoggi's memoir, Escape from Comfort. And this story, it's about a journey, yeah, but not just from one country to another. It's really about the journey from just surviving to actually living a life with meaning.
So let's start with the big question that hangs over this entire story. What if that comfortable life, what if it's not a safe harbor at all? What if your comfort was actually a cage?
You see, the author builds this whole story on a core idea, that there are two totally different kinds of comfort. On one side, you've got stifling comfort, the kind built on fear, mediocrity, just getting by. And on the other side, that's true comfort. That's fulfillment, purpose, a life that really matters. This whole story is about the incredible journey from one to the other.
And that leads us right into our first major theme here, the paradox of comfort. This story isn't just about escaping a war zone. It's about escaping the kind of comfort that comes with just surviving and fighting for the real comfort that comes from a life of significance.
And listen, Khashoggi lays out the stakes right away with this quote. He's saying that real escape, it's a mindset. It's about knowing your why so deeply that going back is simply not an option. There's no plan B. You succeed or you die trying. That's it.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Where does this all kick off? We're going back to Tehran in 1988, and the family is about to take part in what they've been told is just a dress rehearsal. Now, to really get why they had to do this, you have to understand the context. The Islamic Revolution in '79 had completely changed the country. Then, the Iran-Iraq War started, and by '88, Tehran was getting hit with missile attacks. The family was facing a choice no one should ever have to make.
And for them, a clock was ticking, loud. Said was 15. The regime had put a law in place. No boys 15 or older could leave the country. Why? They were being saved for the front lines of the war. For him and his older brother, it was literally now or never.
And this is where it gets just heartbreaking. The whole escape began with a lie. Their guide told them it was just a practice run, a little training session in the mountains. She later admitted she lied to their parents because she knew a real final goodbye would be too traumatic. So they left thinking it was temporary, but it was a one-way ticket. So that lie kicks off the most intense, nail-biting part of this story, the actual trek over the mountain. It was just this brutal ordeal of corruption, bone-chilling cold, and just unimaginable courage.
I mean, just look at the gauntlet they had to run. They had to somehow get through a checkpoint run by the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Then, can you believe this? They had to hide in the house of a corrupt IRGC member himself. They were hiding with the very enemy they were running from. They had to sneak past a watchtower in the middle of the night, and as if that wasn't enough, they nearly died in a freak blizzard at the top of the mountain.
The author uses this quote from Nelson Mandela, and it just perfectly captures the situation. What they were doing was illegal, yes, but it wasn't a crime. It was a necessary act because they were being denied the basic right to live a life they believed in.
You'd think making it over the mountains was the end of the struggle, right? Not even close. It was the beginning of a whole new kind of torture, what the author calls the longest layover. This awful psychological limbo of being stuck, neither here nor there.
So they've made it, they're in Turkey, and just when they think the worst is over, they get hit with this gut-wrenching betrayal. Their guide, Ms. Malik, the one they'd paid and trusted with their lives, just abandons them. She takes the money and runs.
So now their new mountain to climb is just this soul-crushing bureaucracy, the UN refugee process. They're told their real story, fleeing a war, isn't believable enough, so they have to make one up. And that just starts this endless cycle of being moved from one town to another, waiting and waiting, where their entire lives just paused.
And this chart, wow, this really puts it all into perspective. You know that terrifying life-or-death journey over the mountains? That was only 5% of their ordeal. The vast majority of their time, 85%, was spent in the psychological agony of just waiting.
So, after almost a year of this grinding misery, when things are looking absolutely hopeless, a little glimmer of hope appears. And it comes from a place they'd never, ever expected.
But before we get to the hope, there's one more crushing blow. A letter finally arrives from the UN, and after all that time, all that waiting, the news is just devastating.
The letter says they missed their interview with the Swedish delegate. It looked like, because of some bureaucratic mix-up, their one and only chance to get to Sweden, where they had family, was just gone. Can you just imagine the despair? They must have felt like it was all for nothing. It was over. But then, 2 months after that terrible news, another letter shows up.
And this one? It was a miracle. Application accepted. No interview required. They had no idea how it happened at the time, but they later found out their brother in Sweden had hired a lawyer who fought for them and got their case approved. Their future was secured and they didn't even know it was happening.
So, after all of that, what's the big takeaway? What's the ultimate lesson from this incredible, harrowing journey? Well, it all boils down to one thing: the courage to choose.
What they learned is that the real escape wasn't just getting out of Iran. That was just the start. The true escape was from a state of being, from fear, from hopelessness, from a life of just surviving.
And this brings us to the author's final powerful thought. He realized that no matter how bad things get, no matter how trapped you feel, you always have a choice. The only question is whether you have the courage to make the right one.
And that brings the question right back to us, doesn't it? To you. Take a hard look at your own life. What comfort are you clinging to that might actually be a cage? What life of true significance could be waiting for you if you just found the courage to escape?